Welcome to your Fitness Chick podcast. Become your best self. I'm a fitness coach spreading positivity to navigate you to fitness, growth, and transformation. Hey, I'm your host, Abby Smiley-Krause. I am a fitness enthusiast, a huge dog lover, especially to my babies, Gigi and Layla. And I am so passionate about this amazing thing that we call life. In this podcast, I'll be covering topics to improve your fitness, mindset, and well being. Topics such as longevity, meal prepping, overcoming mindset obstacles, nutrition, and of course, everyone's favorite, weight loss. I'm here to help inspire, uplift, educate, and motivate you to become your best self. Join me here every Tuesday for a fresh episode. Welcome to the Your Fitness Chick podcast. Become your best self. I'm your fitness chick and host, Abby Smiley-Krause, and I'm so excited about today's episode. Today's special guest is Dr. Michael Sclafani. I'm going to introduce him and actually have him introduce himself in just a moment. But it's kind of a funny story on how we met, right, Michael?
It sure is.
So we both work out at the same gym, and we both are very into our workouts, and we stay in our zone, and we had seen each other multiple times. And I had shared with you that the first time I saw you, I was like, wow, this guy looks like he knows what he's doing. Uh, I'm like, I should pay attention to what he's doing. But because we always stayed in our own zone, we never really conversated at all. And then what
Mm.
happened was about a month or so ago, we were both training legs, and it was like we had the exact same leg routine in the same order. And I was kind of laughing because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I had to move to like the machine that was right by you. And then you moved to the leg extension machine, and I went to that one right by you. And I was like, he's going to think I'm stalking him. And so anyway, you had taken your earpiece off and said, oh, were you going to say something? And I said, well, no, but since you took that off, I just want to let you know I'm not stalking you. But you obviously have a kick butt leg routine. And here we
I
are.
appreciate that. Right.
So
And Dwight Schrute said it right on The Office that invitation's the most sincere form of flattery, right? So,
that's right. There you go. So it was really kind of funny. We got to talking, and then, God, who would have known that you
mm-mm,
were who you were, and that there was so much that you could offer to share with our listeners
appreciate
today.
that.
So, with that being said, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Dr. Sclafani?
Sure. Michael Sclafani. I'm the owner and founder of Tideline Sports Performance and Rehabilitation. So, we're a sports medicine, sports rehabilitation facility. So we treat people who are active in their everyday life with things like F45, powerlifting, CrossFit, boot camp, things like that, who are dealing with any nagging aches and injuries. And we specialize in the fitness enthusiasts, and we're also active in the community with sponsoring an Olympic weightlifting team, and we're also the medical providers for a soccer team as well here in the area. So we try to stay active in and out of the clinic, and yeah, our main job is to help people just move the best, optimize their function, and just to educate and empower them on what they have going on so that they can get back to crushing it for whatever it is that they do that they enjoy. Because at the end of the day, working out and being active in whatever fitness activity you participate in is really a sense of joy for a lot of people.
For sure. And for us, I mean, it's our lifeline, right? I think you'd agree with
Right.
that. It's our heartbeat.
100%. Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you work with a lot of elite athletes, but it sounds like you also work with just people that are just kind of weekend warriors, hit the gym every now and again, and just kind of have your wide array of offerings for all those people.
Yeah, we define our ideal patient as the fitness enthusiast. So that could be either somebody that's a weekend warrior, like you mentioned, somebody that's active in, whether it's boot camp, group fitness, individual training, bodybuilding, powerlifting, or people that are minor league or semi-professional or professional athletes. So we'll see everything in between, and we meet you where you're at, and we basically identify goals based off of what your goals are, and it's our job to help to bridge that gap between where you are and where you'd like to go.
I love that. So, how did you decide to specialize in sports medicine and orthopedics? What was your inspiration for that?
Yeah, so I played rugby was my sport that I played. So I played rugby for almost a decade, and
And where are
for
you
anybody that
from? I
knows the
don't mean to
sport,
interject. Where did you play at?
yeah, I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay.
So I played back in Cincinnati. And so rugby was my sport that I played growing up, and I loved the strength and conditioning part of it. I loved the just the high intensity and the high energy. But then of course, you get a lot of people that are injured, and we get guys that get dings, we get guys who are more significantly injured that go on to have surgery. And so I really just enjoyed the sports medicine field and orthopedics as a whole. I didn't want to go to medical school because I didn't really want to do surgery. I just wasn't a big fan of the OR. And so I asked myself, I said, well, what is a great opportunity career wise that I can participate in that is still in the realm of sports medicine, has strength and conditioning, has performance, and I don't have to necessarily be in the OR. And I landed on the field of rehabilitation. So I ended up getting my doctorate in physical therapy from the University of Cincinnati. And
Okay.
then after that, I completed an 18-month sports medicine residency at the Cleveland Clinic. So while I was up there, I got a chance to work with the Cleveland Cavaliers, with the Cleveland Indians, and I just got a chance to also work to be one of the medical providers for a college, as well as a Division I high school that ended up ironically winning states the year that I was with them,
Oh,
and
wow.
got a chance to go to the game at Ohio State's stadium, and just cheer them on as well. And it was really fun. I really like working with people who are active, who enjoy what they do, and who make kind of fitness a big part of their active enjoyment. And so I just really just like the puzzle, the challenge. I'm a big biomechanics guy, so to me, everybody that comes into our office, we're talking about how your body moves, and then also just about yeah, sure, some anatomy and muscles, ligaments, tendons, and then some pathophysiology that goes in there. But at the end of the day, I'm kind of like a body mechanic, which is kind of fun to think about as well, because then we're again just kind of helping to bridge that gap between somebody that comes in with, say, low back pain or shoulder pain, but then they want to be able to strict press, or they want to be able to snatch, or they want to be able to do a ring muscle up. And so it's my job to just kind of help to figure that out. And I also really like spending one-on-one time with people, and all of our appointments at Tideline are 60 minutes and they're one-on-one. So we get a
Wow.
really great opportunity to not just work with our patients that way, where we're helping them get back to whatever activity, but we also get to know them on a personal level, which is really fun. And then we get a chance to really build a nice, solid relationship between people that come into our office, our patients that we work with, as well as all of our providers here, which is a really fun part of the job as well.
Wow. Well, I think that that's amazing because, especially that you yourself was an athlete and continued to be very fit and athletic. Obviously, you can identify the frustration that a lot of these people are going through, these individuals, when they get injured and are kind of put on the sideline, if you will, and just want to get back in the game. So, obviously, having you
Mhm.
had that experience yourself is a huge asset.
Yeah,
Um,
it's really cool.
And then also, I think it just speaks volumes because I'm sure most of our listeners will agree that the one thing that you always feel whenever you go into any kind of a medical appointment is rushed.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I take my mom to a lot of eye doctor appointments, and it's like they don't even have time to really listen to even 1 minute. It's going to throw them off. And so to have a full hour, that's like phenomenal.
It's both challenging and rewarding at the same time, right? And
Right.
that's exactly why our practice exists, is because I think the modern healthcare system is really tough to navigate nowadays, right? I mean, you've
Yeah.
got things like who accepts my insurance, when can I get in, how long is the appointment, am I going to be working with an assistant, or am I going to be working with what specific provider am I going to be working with as well? And I think that is why practices like Tideline and our practice here has part of what's been so successful is the fact that we really want to actually listen and identify what's going on, because you're never rushed, and patients will tell us everything. I mean, it's just sometimes we get people that they come in with a tome full of every single workout and all that stuff, which is fine. I will listen, and we integrate that as well. But yeah, I think that modern healthcare nowadays is going to really start to trend towards more of those boutique one-on-one practices where people are going to feel a little bit more valued rather than kind of just moving people through like a mill. And I think that, and I worked at one of those for 1 year, and it was really frustrating because you don't get to spend the time with people that they deserve, and they don't feel like they're heard, and they don't feel like that their specific problems are even being addressed. And the worst thing you can do is this cookie cutter medicine, which I think is really dangerous for a lot of people, because that's how things get missed, and that's how people's cases get mishandled. And I think it's really important that we individualize everybody's treatment, and we also listen, because there's a big part of just part of medicine where you're just hearing people out. And I think we live in a world today that's so fast paced, and people have this instant gratification and social media. Sometimes it's just really nice just to be able to sit down and have somebody look you in the eye and say, tell me about how things are going. And that's how I start every patient visit. And people will tell me personal stuff, how things are going. They'll tell me orthopedically how things are going, workout wise, recovery wise. It is an open ended question for that exact reason.
And that's really phenomenal, because I think most people don't feel like they are heard. And then they start Googling and they're trying to be proactive in their health. They start self diagnosing, because a lot of my fitness clients, when they get a little tweak in their back or something, they'll be like, oh my gosh, and I'm like, okay, just calm down, let's start here. So I think that
Sure.
by having someone who really, like yourself, sits down and listens to them, that's just got to, I'm sure, improve your retention rate through the roof, first of all.
Yeah, people just have a better outcome. I think, when people have a better outcome, I mean, yes, we need to generate revenue we got to keep the Wi-Fi on, we have overhead, but at the end of the day, we're in the business of helping people. And I think that for a lot of people, working out, being active in their fitness community is a big part of their life. I mean, you're active as well. I mean, could you imagine if you had an injury where you couldn't train for a week? I
Yeah,
mean,
I've been
just
there.
1 week. Yeah, and that would just, I mean, how squirrely do you get, right?
Awful.
And it's nothing is more frustrating when you try something on your own, it doesn't work, or you go to see another provider and you feel like you're just kind of a number, or you get dismissed. And I think that there's a big part of our practice that really wants to get to know you, that wants to really help you through this, and just kind of help you to just crush your limits and just get past everything that you've been dealing with as well.
Now, how long has Tideline been open? When did you found that?
So I have kind of a very convoluted career path that we can talk about in more depth too. But I started this practice about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. My
Okay.
wife and I were actually living in Delray Beach on the Atlantic side,
Oh yeah.
and so for those who are familiar with the state of Florida, we see this kind of just kind of like an East Coast, West Coast type of demographic, where a lot of people on the East Coast and the Atlantic side of Florida are, from New York, Philly, things like that, all from the northeast
Northeast.
part of the state.
Hmm.
And then a lot of people that are from the Midwest, like my wife and I, are over on the Gulf Coast. So when my wife actually got a job opportunity here in Sarasota and Lakewood Ranch, we decided to move. And it was funny because I was looking for, at the time I was working for the Cleveland Clinic Florida in Fort Lauderdale. And, I was really trying to spearhead their sports rehab department and try to get some sports medicine projects underway. And when we moved over here, I was looking at jobs at like IMG, other practices, and wasn't really, before we even moved over, wasn't really finding anything that really jived with me. I was like, I'm board certified in sports medicine. I've been doing this my whole career. And my wife was the one who said, hey, I've been telling you for years you should start your own practice. And I'm like, absolutely not. I went kicking and screaming into the entrepreneurial world. Like my personality type was used to be very ultra conservative, risk averse, did not want to make any sudden moves. I had been in academia, I'd been in research, I worked for the Cleveland Clinic. It's just things were very much a safe harbor. And for us to move over to the Gulf side of Florida, knowing no one, having no connections, it was tough. I designed our website actually while we were still living in Delray Beach. My wife started selling off all this furniture because we were going to put some stuff in storage before we found a place that we were going to our house that we eventually bought. But yeah, she sold off the couch, and I came home and I was like, what am I supposed to do? So I dragged the guest mattress out of our guest bedroom and I threw it on the floor in the living room, opened up Squarespace and just started designing the website and stayed up. It took me like 6 hours just trying to figure out like how to do it. I mean, I knew very little about the business part of things when I first started. And but yeah, it was a wild ride. And then we moved, I had some systems in place, and then we moved over here and actually started the gym. I started the practice in the second floor of a CrossFit gym. And
Oh,
that's
wow.
where
Okay.
that's where the practice originally started. And
Okay.
yeah, very humble beginnings until only for the first few months, and then we ended up, moving into our current space now that is a really cool functional space, is what I call it.
Yeah, awesome. So I was curious how long ago you started because I was curious when you started about 3 years ago with Tideline, did you already have this based on the fact that you had worked with cookie cutter experiences before? Did you already know in your mind that you were going to deliver a superior guest experience? Like, did you start out of the gate with those 1 hour services for the most part?
100%. I knew. So what I actually did was big shout out to our to the mastermind program that I'm a part of. I actually undergo business coaching, and I'm part of a mastermind program for other practices like mine that do this boutique 60-minute one-on-one sports performance style rehab across the country. And they really help to curate some of the business and some of the patient experience. I was very fortunate that for the, at that time, I'd been in practice for 7 years. So clinically, I didn't feel like it was going to be a big challenge. But then from a systems integration and a business organization standpoint, that's where it became a little bit trickier. But I knew that I wanted to do 60 minutes one-on-one, and I knew that I wanted to curate. I call it a Disney World experience. Somebody's going to forego their insurance because we're out of network. They're going to forego their in-network benefits to come to see me. I want to make sure that when they step through Tideline, from the moment that they pick up the phone to call to make an appointment, from the time that they come in, that they have just the best patient experience. And even afterwards as well, we have a lot of touch points, we have a lot of follow-ups, we have a lot of nurturing that goes into our patient relationships as well.
Which is awesome and amazing. So, how many providers do you have? I mean, obviously, if you had been on the other coast and doing some business yourself, obviously bringing in a team would put a different
Mhm.
spin on things as well. So, how many providers do you currently have working with you?
So right now it's actually just me. So right now it's myself and our office manager. We had two other clinicians that one ended up parting ways for another opportunity unrelated to sports medicine, and
Hmm.
then we had another provider that it just didn't work out with. So right now we are in the process of finishing up, hopefully, fingers crossed, with extending an offer to a really great candidate for somebody to join our team who currently owns a practice on the Atlantic side, actually in Vero Beach. So
Okay.
wanting to kind of merge a lot of skills together. But yeah, part of the business from my end has not just been how to get a reputation and how to get your brand awareness and your name out, but also to develop some leadership skills as well. So once you start a business, as I'm sure you know, it becomes your baby, right? And so you
Hmm.
become very protective about who you bring in, who you allow access to certain things, who you're going to allow to represent your business. And I knew that from the beginning. I love patient care, but it's very difficult to be in the business and to work on the business at the same time, which is what I'm
Right.
currently doing. And
Right.
I think that, it's important. I always knew that I wanted to scale past myself. Some of that was with our office manager, Brandon, who does an amazing job with taking care of a lot of the day-to-day operations of the practice. And then also with bringing other clinicians aboard who are able to help me out with patient fulfillment. And that allows me to strike a good balance between seeing patients myself while continuing to still grow and scale the business as well.
Awesome. Yeah, it is difficult when you're the owner because you do wear a lot of hats, right? So,
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, I used to own a day spa, and it was funny because I would show up looking glamorous, at the day spa, but I was like, if you could have seen me 3 hours ago, I was cleaning the toilet in the bathroom. I was the
Yeah.
janitor, I was the esthetician, I was the payroll, I was the performer, the event planner, the website designer, all that stuff. So it does become a challenge. And that's why having an important team and building them is crucial. But obviously, in the same breath, it's just as crucial to make sure you bring in the right people. So
100%.
it's worth it to take the time and wear all those hats till you find the right fit. So tell me, obviously, I deal with fitness clients and with my website, my app, www.yourfitnesscheck.com, and people
Mhm.
inevitably get injured, right? So what would you say is the top three most common injuries that you treat, and maybe some tips and prevention for those?
Sure. I would say of all of because we treat a huge breadth of patients that are involved with so many different things: pickleball, tennis, barbell sports, group fitness, Globo gym, commercial gym. And I would say the three most common areas are the neck, the shoulder, and the lower back. So we treat everything, but I've said those would probably be the three most common injury sites. So, and I'm going to cheat a little bit because the neck and shoulder have a lot of different mechanical overlap. So when we talk about, for example, people with neck pain, we get some people who are dealing with just like a lot of stiffness around their neck. Some people will get a lot of upper trap tightness, and they'll feel like they kind of are always tensed up whenever they're working out, and they can't find a good activation. We'll see some people that even get a pinched nerve that will, affect some symptoms down their arm as well. And then same thing with the shoulder. We get a lot of like rotator cuff irritation, labral irritation, just some various tendinopathies around the shoulder as well. And I will say that the biggest thing is to make sure that the thoracic spine, your middle back, is not only mobile, but also that there's some strength in that area as well. So just as like a quick biomechanical overview, when we take a look at our spine, it's made up of three major regions: your neck, your middle back, which is your thoracic spine by where your shoulder blades are, and then your lower back. And so when we talk about, for example, people with neck pain, a lot of times people will have limited middle back mobility that then it creates an extra amount of strain one level above the kinetic chain further upstream into their neck. And that's where people will develop a lot of upper trap tightness, just some global neck tightness that may irritate the nerves as they exit the cervical spine, the neck, and go down there as well. And then same thing with the shoulder. A lot of people lack true overhead mobility. So we talk about overhead mobility, we're talking about the ability to raise your arm up while keeping your bicep directly in line with your ear. And a lot of people will lose some of that mobility for, a few different reasons, but regaining that mobility is going to be paramount to help with that. So when we talk about both the shoulder and the neck, the two biggest things that we're looking at is to get a little bit of some mobility through their thoracic spine. And we have a couple YouTube videos that I can easily pop on here as well, links to.
Okay, great.
But
We'll put the
one
links below.
exercise, yeah, one exercise called thread the needle. I'm a big fan of that. You can use a cable or a band, and that just helps to give you a little bit more rotation through your upper back, which I think is lacking a lot. A lot of people's upper back become really stiff. We got a lot of people that work a desk job. We got a lot of people that hold a lot of stress. A lot of people will undertrain their back, for example. So that can create some stiffness there. And then we also have a lot of people that will lack that true shoulder overhead mobility. And you need a little bit of your thoracic spine, your middle back, to help give your shoulder some clearance for that overhead mobility. So there's one that I really like that's an eccentric for your lats, where just holding a 5-pound dumbbell, laying on your back, and just simply just coming straight up overhead, keeping your bicep to your ear, helps to lengthen the tension within your lat, helps to open up your upper back, helps to break up, any type of capsular restriction that's around your shoulder. So that'd be probably my top two for neck and shoulder. And we see a lot of people with back pain, low back pain as well. We used to think that low back pain was a lot for, the geriatric population, but we know that the more active we are, how much, tension people hold in their low back. We actually get a lot of people that will come in and they're like, I'm so active with X, Y, and Z, but I cannot get my back to calm down. I do something like bent over rows and it bothers me. Maybe I go to CrossFit and I do an Olympic lift, or maybe I'm a power lifter and I do deadlifts and it's like my back never seems to relax. And one of the biggest things that we talk to our patients about is that a lot of people lack what we call true segmental flexion. So we think about your spine. Your spine is a bunch of building blocks that are all stacked together. In between each one of those building blocks, there's these rubber bands called ligaments that hold those joints together. When you go to, say, bend down to tie your shoes or to put your socks on, you need the ability to round your back. Now, when we do a deadlift, right, we don't want to deadlift down there. So what I tell people is that you want to live in flexion, which is that bent over position, but lift in neutral. And so that neutral spine allowing you to brace yourself and not injure your back. But really, most people end up getting hurt with their low back on a submaximal lift. So meaning that they're using weight that's really not all too heavy for them. And they're very confused as to why that was the straw that caused them to have a lot of low back spasms. So one thing that's really important is that when you bend down to touch your toes, that you're not just bending through your torso, but that you're also able to round your back and not just held in neutral. If your lower back is held in neutral for the entire time, the joints get stiff, those muscles get stiff, and you can sit on the foam roller, you can get as many massages as you'd like, you can do whatever, kind of stretch you find on Instagram right now, but you'll have a really hard time getting some of that lower back mobility back until you really work on that flexion. And so one of the exercises that I can link to is called a Jefferson curl. And we see a lot of people that are really strong in neutral. They're able to deadlift a lot. They're able to go to boot camps. They're able to run. They're able to do a lot of things, but they lack the ability to truly round their lower back in their everyday life. And so those muscles become short, stiff, and achy. And the Jefferson curl is a really nice way to give yourself a little bit more breathing room for there.
Yeah, that all really makes a lot of sense, and I've seen it with my clients as well. And it's really kind of funny because I've seen a lot of really funny videos on TikTok and YouTube and stuff like that where you can always really easily identify someone who works out and knows proper body mechanics and form, because just what we do every day, like bringing in our
Right.
groceries and how we squat to tie our shoe or put the leash on our dog to walk them. It's like just such a specific way that it's actually kind of funny. But I feel like all of what you said is 150% dead on. And a lot of it's from a lot of lack of core strength too. I think a lot of people, they can't compensate with core strength. And so their lower back and other things are engaged that really shouldn't be in specific movements. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, there's some merit to that. I think that the ability to brace your core is really important. So when we talk about low back pain, I think at least a lot of the patients that I've seen, I've been very fortunate because by the time that they come to me, they usually have some type of coaching, whether it's a personal trainer or group fitness. So they at least know that, hey, I've at least tried to engage my core, which I think is kind of like step one is core engagement. When you do a squat, a deadlift, you do something, or even just an overhead press to make sure that you're not getting to this huge arch in your back when you lock out. By the time that they come to see me, they usually have some type of ability to at least activate that. It's interesting because when we look at, I used to work with a lot of gymnasts when I was in Denver, and we actually saw a lot of stress fractures in the lower back with gymnasts. And we can argue, for example, that gymnasts in the sports world have one of the strongest cores out there. But if they lack the mechanics of their lower back, they're going to end up placing a lot of stress on the bones of their spine, which is what leads to some of those stress fractures type injuries in there. So I
Mhm.
think that having the ability to activate your core, but then also the ability to know when it's time to brace, and then also to be able to make sure that you're not so rigid like C3PO from Star Wars, but actually be able to move in a way, right? Because
Right.
otherwise you're just going to be walking around like a droid for your whole life, and then that's no way to live either. Because like even just sitting up in bed, right? Like I mean, as silly as it sounds, if
Yeah.
you, I mean, I know if you have had back pain before too. A lot of people have
Yes.
had a history of mechanical or muscular low back pain. Man, it's the simplest things that seem to get you, right? It's like I'll have somebody that has really debilitating low back pain and has an issue with like getting up out of bed first thing in the morning because they have to round in order to sit up out of bed. But then they can go and they can do like an empty bar deadlift with no pain, right? So it's the
Right.
ability to round their back and to actually restore those mechanics more so than it is to strengthen and brace around there.
Exactly. Well, I want to shift gears here for 1 second. So,
Sure.
just from reading over your very impressive bio, which will be posted on this in the show notes, you do something that's called dry needling. Tell me a little bit more
Hmm.
about that, because that's somewhat of a unique procedure.
Yeah. Yeah, dry needling is really cool. It's been around for a long time. So, actually, when I was in Denver, so after I finished my sports residency at the Cleveland Clinic, I was recruited to go out to Denver and work with a sports medicine department out there and did some research and everything. And I worked with professional rugby players while I was out there as well. And the one of the rugby clubs that I worked with, they actually asked me to get certified in dry needling. And so I did, and just because it's such a great intervention. When I moved to Florida it was a while back, like 2016, 2017, dry needling was not approved for the state of Florida because a lot of acupuncturists were afraid that we were going to, cross paths and there was going to be some infringement on patient territory. But dry needling is essentially very similar to acupuncture in the way that we use what's called a solid monofilament needle, which means that it's similar to like a cat whisker. It's not an injection like you would get like a cortisone injection or a Botox injection or something like that. It's very solid, and I tell people it's the size of a cat whisker. And it goes back, dry needling works using something called the sliding filament theory. So, for those who didn't major in exercise science, the sliding filament theory means that your muscles are supposed to slide back and forth like strands on a rope. When you overuse a muscle, it develops a knot, or you become really tight in an area and you try to do things like foam roll it, hit it with a massage gun, things like that. You develop this kind of chokehold state within the muscle. Muscles are just like all the other cells, right? They need nutrients to come in, they need waste products to come out. And when you're kind of stuck in this fully clenched state within a muscle, that's where you experience things like pain. We can even get myofascial referred pain, meaning that a knot in one area can refer down your arm, down your leg, and some people will confuse that with nerve pain as well.
Right.
But what dry needling does is we're with surgical precision, we're able to go into that muscle knot to stimulate it, to get that muscle to quickly contract and then relax.
Release.
And once yeah, we get something called a twitch response, very similar to the corner of your eyelid when you get a little twitch on there. And it's a really powerful intervention that we use. It's a fantastic way to open up the door for a lot of people's mobility, for a lot of people's pain, and some of the symptoms that they walk into. And then we don't stop there because we know that dry needling will help to get things moving, but then it's our job to actually figure out, okay, how do we correct for what was going on, right? There's a reason why, for example, we go back to our patient with shoulder and neck pain who constantly feels tension in their upper trap. Sure, we can dry needle the upper trap to get that muscle to release, right? But it's also our job to figure out, well, why was the upper trap getting dumped on in the first place? Was it lack
Right.
of overhead mobility? Was it X, Y, and Z? And so that's what makes dry needling so powerful. A lot of people will ask, for example, is dry needling painful? Does it hurt? And I hate the fact that this intervention has the word needle in it because a lot of people assume it's an injection or that it's going to be painful, like if they have a tattoo or something like that. Some people have a fear of needles, right? But it feels kind of like if you've ever used a lacrosse ball or a foam roller to an area, it's like a deep muscle ache, but then you get
Sure.
this little twitch like an eyelid, and then it just opens everything up. Sometimes people get a little bit sore, like they feel like they just worked out for a couple hours afterwards, but really great intervention. And I've been doing dry needling for God almost 10 years now, so it's been really great to use that intervention, especially in the world of sports medicine. We live in a world where a lot of people like instant gratification. So if you walk in and your upper traps are tight and that's been killing your neck and you've been getting, X, Y, and Z symptoms, imagine if we can just go ahead and just decrease all that tension in your upper traps. That will satisfy the chief complaint that you came in with. And then we start to address some of the movement mechanics that cause some of that upper trap tightness to begin with.
Right. So get the relief going, and then you can dissect it down and get to the cause and root of the challenge.
Exactly.
So with that being said, do people feel instantly better, or is this
We'll
recommended?
get
Does it progressively get better? Like, should they do a certain amount of sessions for it, or how long does each session last?
Yeah, so and that's where I hated it when I hated in during my education when professors would say it depends, and unfortunately now here I am 10 years later, 11 years later, say it depends, right? But really, it depends on a lot of factors, right? It depends on the muscle, it depends on the movement, right? So let's go back to our example with people that have a lot of upper trap tightness, which a lot of people listening to this do. A lot of people work desk jobs, a lot of people overcompensate with their upper trap for whatever reason. If we're able to get those upper trap muscles to temporarily calm down, two things. One, some muscles have memory, so sometimes what will happen is your upper traps will calm down and they'll start to release some of that tension. But just due to the fact that they're kind of in the habit of feeling fully clenched, you may have a small return of that
Right.
tightness, not to the same degree, but kind of two steps forward, one step back type of deal. So
Right.
that's one thing. The other thing too is that sometimes it takes a couple visits to really change the way people move. And we're not looking to, for example, we've all seen those like fitness fail videos where people are deadlifting and they have like a complete C macaroni noodle when they move, and people have the wonky squats, and we've seen all those TikTok and Instagram videos. We're talking about, hey, what if you lack 10 degrees of overhead mobility? What's that doing to like, are your upper traps compensating because they have to shrug to get the last little bit? What's your lower back doing? And so people will feel a huge change in their symptoms on day one. The question, the variable then becomes how long that lasts for and how well they're able to integrate some of the new movement patterns and the new movement mechanics that we will go over with them, and how quickly they're able to integrate that to their everyday life as well as into whatever gym activity or fitness activity they enjoy.
Yeah, and a lot of people probably don't even realize how much their range of motion and mobility has become limited
Mhm.
until that release is truly felt. And then they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, right?
Yeah, it's really fun. I will say this. So I love my career. I love our profession, but very rarely do we get these instant gratification moments. And dry needling is one of those few like aha instant gratification. And it's
Right.
like I get a dopamine rush because somebody feels so much better so quickly. So
Yeah.
it's really great. If you're curious about it, you want to know more, there's a lot more science behind it. I'm happy to talk to anybody about that as well.
Awesome. And it's a great way to make friends real quick too. All of a sudden all
Right?
of a sudden they like you a whole lot more. Um,
Right, right.
so I love that. So let's move on to, everybody I think is getting ready to come into the new year, right? And we know that in the new year our gym becomes inundated with all the people just trying again one more time to get back into shape, get back on the wagon. This year is it. What advice
Right.
would you have for our listeners on what they can do for optimal body function?
I think the biggest thing is to really concentrate on, like you mentioned, full range of motion. I think that we see a lot of people who are so eager to rush things. I think that there's sort of this concept between movement completion and movement quality, right? So let's say, for example, you are working with a personal training client, or maybe you're doing remote programming, and that athlete pulls up and they're like, okay, great. We've got, for example, squats. Well, you know what? It is not harmful for your knees to squat below parallel and get full depth, assuming that you have enough mobility in your ankles and enough mobility in your hips. By all means, squat as low as you can. That max full range of motion is going to be really key. Now, what that may require you to do is to lighten the load temporarily until you get a little bit more acclimated to that new range of motion. It's very hard, for example, and not to pick on powerlifters, we work a lot with powerlifters who are freakishly strong. They get just below parallel, they get that green light, and then they come back up. I did CrossFit for a long time and Olympic weightlifting. We're getting, almost ass to grass on there and then standing back up. That takes a little bit less weight because it's really hard because we're working through a larger range through there. It may hurt my ego a little bit to use a lighter weight. And then I think too, the other thing is, or let's take, for example, like a group fitness, maybe you go to a boot camp gym and they're like, okay, great, we're going to do goblet squats and we're going to do, this station's going to have 15 goblet squats. And, a lot of people just kind of go up and down, up and down, up and down. And I think that movement quality is going to be really key for people who it's not necessarily natural for. And I think that's a lot of more of the beginner and the intermediate athletes that we see. I think a lot of advanced athletes are able to make that mind-body connection and are able to kind of sense what the desired stimulus is and how to achieve that. And sometimes that means lowering the weight. Sometimes that means being present a little bit more and maybe not listening to all the background noise in a boot camp or group fitness environment. And we love working with group fitness athletes. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it is a fantastic way to be part of a fitness community. It's a fantastic way to not have to worry about writing your own programming and to do something that's a little bit outside your comfort zone. But I think that a lot of times the intentionality of things can sometimes get drowned out in that environment as well, or even just in the environment that you and I train in, where people are just jamming out on their headphones and they're like, great, I got 3 sets of 12 of leg press and I'm just going to do, this limited range of motion. And I think really being a little bit more intentional about it. I had a mentor who used to tell me to train long to live long, and it really struck with me too.
A great thing. I like that a lot. And I love it when I get to, like, especially on Sundays and I'm not on such a time crunch. I'm just like,
Yeah,
this is just the best day ever. I got
right.
Sunday. I did my calves, I did abs, I did cardio, and I did chest, and so it's good when you do have that time. And I love what you said. And I think one of the things too to emphasize is that people have unrealistic expectations about how quick their results are going to come. And, people will look at someone like you or someone like me who I've been working out for 30 years. I know you've been working out, you're 10 years younger than me, but just as long from the get-go. So you'll catch up eventually. But for people like us that have been working out as long as we have, people don't realize how long it takes to build
hmm
muscle, even if you have that dedication, that consistency, a lot of time. So for optimal body function, I think is also setting a realistic expectation about the time you got to put in, right?
Absolutely. I think that, and also identifying where you're at in the process. If you're, there's a really great program called RP Strength, and the owner of it, Dr. Mike Israetel, he kind of talks about beginner, intermediate, and advanced athletes. And beginner athletes are just they're trying to learn the movement. Like, what is a chest press? How do I do that? What does that motion look like? And intermediate athletes, they're trying to get a better mind muscle connection. Great, we're doing a chest press. How do I really feel that working in my chest and not my shoulders and triceps, taking over the movement, leading to injury, blah blah blah. And then advanced athletes are really trying to expose and completely annihilate all those, but they're basically draining that muscle in a very targeted fashion. I think being honest with yourself and knowing where you're at, and sometimes that may change. Like when I did CrossFit for 10 years And then I ended up leaving the CrossFit world and went back to LA Fitness to do more of like bodybuilding hypertrophy style training. My mind muscle connection was terrible for certain movements that we just didn't train a lot in CrossFit. And it wasn't a knock on CrossFit. I was a decent athlete, and you just have to be honest with yourself. Like you said, set realistic expectations about where you're at in the journey. And it may
Yeah.
change too.
That's true. 100. My workouts always are changing, and it's just based on what goal we're striving towards. So, switching gears one more time as we're going to start wrapping up here fairly soon. I want to talk about the world of
Sure.
supplements.
Oh
I know
yeah.
you offer supplements, and with my new website that's going to be launching, I partnered with a lab. I have some really key supplements that I believe in 100%. I think that um, the supplements either have a really good interpretation or a bad interpretation by people. Does it just become really expensive urine, or does it serve a purpose? And I think it could go either way. So, with that being said, I was curious for you. What are your top 3 favorite supplements that's very well versed for just a beginner athlete to an advanced athlete?
So I really like whey protein because I feel like that's a staple. I think a
Mhm.
lot of people don't get enough protein in their diet, and I'm sure you can attest. I don't run our nutrition program. Our office manager does, and I'm sure he would agree. You would agree as well. And I think sometimes too, it's very difficult to get as much protein as we need sometimes on training days as well to help to jumpstart that reparative process. So creatine is a really great supplement because it's one of the most researched supplements out there. So one of the things that's really nice about creatine is it will help you with your energy production during your workout. So that's where they've done a lot of studies for is during your workout and or before your workout. And basically what happens is creatine can affect your phosphate system, which is largely involved with your energy sources that you use while you're doing different activities. So you have basically 3 energy systems. One that's kind of like a quick action, so like turning your head real quickly. You have one that's more of an intermediate, and one energy system that's more of your endurance, like an hour plus. Style workout, and all 3 of those energy systems, they all work together. So it's not like you like change from first gear to second gear to third gear. They're all sort of integrated in there. And creatine's really nice because it will improve the quick production of something called ATP, which is one of the molecules that your body uses to help to generate that instantaneous power, that instantaneous strength. So I like to drink that in my intra workout strength shake while I'm training.
Mhm.
And then the third thing that I really like is something called BCAAs and EAA. So branched chain amino acids and essential amino acids are really great because I know some people there's some mixed evidence about them. So take this with a grain of salt because I personally think that they have helped me a lot if they're used correctly. So basically, all proteins, which makes up our muscles, and also some of the other structures in our body, are made up of amino acids. And so we have branched chain amino acids and essential amino acids that are a certain type of protein building block. And so a lot of people, when they're doing a lot of muscle building or a lot of strength training, they break down a lot of muscle tissue, which then your body repairs, which is where growth occurs, whether it's hypertrophy, whether it's strength, whether it's improved endurance. You have to break things down and then rebuild things up a little bit stronger.
Mhm.
Branched chain amino acids give you, and essential amino acids give you some of those tiny building blocks to help to jumpstart that reparative process. So my workouts for my own training are anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours long, and they're all hypertrophy based.
Mhm.
So for me, I really like to have a few of those building blocks in there. And it also allows for me to protect the muscle cells and my muscle tissue that I've built up so that my body doesn't use that as a potential energy source because I built that muscle tissue up. I don't want my body to try to break that down because it's running low on energy.
Correct. And it also can help you recover quicker, right? So faster
100%.
recovery, less muscle soreness so that you can get back after it. And I like to drink mine. I mix my branched chain amino acids with my creatine, and then I put it in my
Uh-huh.
water bottle, and that's what I'm drinking during my workout. What do you think about that? Or do you recommend to drink it post workout, or does it matter?
So again, there's some mixed evidence out there if you look at the research. And what I found that works for me the best is to mix it both together while you're working out,
Yeah.
just because they're so intermingled in there. And also too, it also depends on how long your workouts. You and I, we train at LA Fitness, so it's not too difficult for us to complete a set, have a sip of whatever we got in our water bottle, complete another set. It's very, work, rest, work, rest. When I was involved in CrossFit,
Yeah.
we had, a lot of CrossFit workouts. They have a strength portion in the beginning. We'll work on technique or we'll work on squats or work on something in the beginning of the workout. And then the second part of the workout is the actual quote unquote Metcon, where you're doing things for time, for reps, things like that. And there's not a lot of the ideas that you're not just sitting around and then sipping a water bottle in between sets. So it kind of depends on your training modality. When I was doing CrossFit, I would drink my creatine and branched chain amino acids on my way to the gym so that I didn't have to worry about drinking them while I'm in the middle of, running a quarter of a mile, doing ring muscle ups, cleaning 200 pounds and then like trying to do something else as well. There's not really the time where you're just kind of standing around chilling and, listening to Taylor Swift and, checking out your gains in the mirror, right? It's like a completely different style of training. So,
Completely.
and even when I played rugby, I would utilize a lot of these supplements as either before or after training, and because the idea being that we're not sitting around being able to take water breaks, and also we both love bodybuilding style training. Bodybuilding is also not doing a set and then just chilling on the bench and just having a cigarette out back and just kicking it, right? Like it's still we're still training, but it allows for us to be able to consume more products during our workouts. And I think some of the other training modalities that are out there that some people that are listening to this podcast may participate in.
For sure, absolutely. And if you're doing something like a group class or, like body pump or something like that, then by consuming it prior, it's building kind of that reservoir, if you will, and help push you
Mm-hmm.
through a lot more, in my opinion. So those I absolutely agree with, and I love all those. Obviously, I just shared I'm actually participating in those too. So thank you so much. Those are the best three I like too. So whey protein, creatine, and your branched chain amino acids and your essential amino acids together.
Mm-hmm.
So as we conclude, I want to just say when I met you and found out your name and we started following each other on social media, I was really blown away by just how much information that you share. I mean, you have so much valuable information, and you even have your own podcast, which is called Tideline Talks, and you even do
Mm-hmm.
your opening, your intro that explains it's easy to understand. So you take it and for lack of a nicer way to say it, you dumb it down a little bit, for people who are as advanced in education with sports medicine or orthopedics as yourself. So, talk to me real quickly about your podcast. When did you launch it? When do your fresh episodes roll out? And how can people chime in on that?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for the compliments on it. Is social media is tough in today's world, and our podcast is really fun. We typically do a lot of interviews, but occasionally we'll do some monologues.
Mm-hmm.
And like you mentioned, it's called Tideline Talks, and basically what we do is we do try to take either concepts. If it's a monologue, I'll use real patient examples and talk about somebody that came into our clinic and discuss their case a little bit about what we found, the reason why they were experiencing shoulder pain, back pain, neck pain, knee pain, whatever, and then talk to them a little bit more. Talk on the episode about what we did to help jumpstart their recovery process. And I started the podcast about a little over 2 years ago. I waited until I had hired our first clinician so that I would be able to step back a little bit from the amount of clinical care that I was providing, which allowed me, part of that was to allow me to do other projects like marketing and the podcast and things like that. More recently, we've kind of had undulating episodes that are released periodically. We used to do them once per week. Now we do them about twice per month. And some of them, like I said, are interviews like this, which are really cool to just sit down with people who are involved in the fitness and healthcare industry and just allow them to share their story, get a different background. Even, for example, we brought somebody on who does mixed martial arts and cage fighting. So
Oh,
even if
wow.
you never done that before, she's a badass.
I
Actually, her
bet.
name's Kylie Marsh. If you get a chance to
Oh,
listen
I
to it,
did
it's
listen to
great.
that podcast.
Or
That was great.
yeah, and she's really cool. And now you're learning a little bit more about somebody else's training, a little bit about something that's outside of your world, and that's essentially what we wanted to do too. But it's a lot of fun. Typically, once we get on a more regular schedule, they're typically released every Tuesday at 5 a.m. If you give us a follow on Instagram, we always release an Instagram reel on the same day that they're dropped. They're available on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. So if you search Tideline Talks on either one of those apps, you'll find it. I'm sorry you had to listen to my voice again. I when I first started the podcast, I don't know if you did this, Abby, but when I first started the podcast, what I did was I actually accidentally went on Reddit and I was like, is there a filter to make my voice sound less nasal and all this stuff? And somebody, no joke, made a comment in Reddit. They were like, no amount of technology is going to recover what nature effed up for you. And I was like, oh, that hurts so bad. And I'm like,
Ow, tell me
you
what
put
you really
yourself out
think.
there.
Tell me what
I
you
know,
think.
right? And it's, when you run a business, you're the face of a business. You use social media. You put your face out. You do podcasts. You're putting yourself out as a state of vulnerability, and so it takes a lot of courage and a little bit of that. So it's like, if for whatever reason my voice doesn't jive with people, like I totally get it. I'm no Walter Cronkite, so but I wanted to be Tideline Talks to be kind of like a mix between like kind of like a TED Talk, but kind of like almost like a radio show, just
Right.
something very casual that
Yeah.
people can find easily digestible, easily palatable information around the fitness and healthcare industry that maybe they find something that's useful for them, maybe that's interesting, a source of entertainment, whatever. It's sort of an open slate for anybody.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I've listened to a couple of the episodes because I'm just I have such a huge thirst for knowledge. And so every day, when I'm getting ready, I'm listening to podcasts. And when I'm in my car, I'm listening to podcasts. And when I'm meal prepping, I'm listening to podcasts because I just love learning and it inspires me. Because I'm sure you'll agree too. Sometimes when you are wearing all those hats, and you're going, and then you're eating a certain regimen and nutrition program like we are, you're training super hard, you have to make sure you get enough sleep. Eventually you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose it. so
Yeah.
so you're like, okay, gotta recharge my pixie dust. Okay, let's keep that positive uplifting information going, so that we can give ourselves to people too in a better tone. So with that,
Correct.
I loved your podcast and they were fun and they were interesting. They were easy to
Thank you.
follow. And the thing I really like about them is that I think it can speak to a huge realm of different people and that it's always going to have something in there that people can identify with in some capacity, whether it's themselves or maybe their kids that are in athletics or their friends or their husband and their spouse, whatever. So I love that. So check out Tideline Talks on Spotify and Apple. And, obviously you've had a lot of things shake up in the last few years, like, founding and starting your business, relocating over to this other coast. What's next for you?
Oh man, that's a big question. We are right now we're currently in the process of potentially bringing on another clinician, so that will come, with a whole host of more skill set, more opportunities for growth within the practice. I think the biggest step that I'd like to take forward is to continue to reach outside of our four walls. So I think that sometimes when you're in the business a lot, space or whether or not you have a physical space like ours in a standalone clinic, it can be very easy to hermetically seal yourself from the outside world where you're like, okay, I'm working on the business, I'm working in the business, I'm trying to help people that come through the door, I'm looking to market, et cetera, right? And then, I think a lot of times we forget that there is sort of a bigger community out there. And so my next step is to continue to help to get out of the four walls of our office as physically and metaphorically. And, one of the ways that we do that is I'll go ahead and plug them, the Sarasota Paradise USL soccer team. They're a minor league soccer team here in the area, and we are the medical providers for them. We just re-signed to be the medical providers for them for 2024. It's a
Nice.
great way for us to kind of get outside of the office. Basically, what we do preseason injury screen for all of the athletes before the season starts. We then do twice a week. I go to the practice facility and I run an on-site injury clinic and then help those guys get tuned up, take a look at anything, and then we provide sideline medical coverage during the game. So it's a nice way. I love the patient care that we do here in our clinic, but it feels so good to get out of the four walls and you kind of get it's a different lever that you get to pull clinically to do sideline medical management versus working in the clinic. So the next step will be to continue to grow our the what Tideline is to not just think of it as a physical space, but also just more of a living entity that exists within our community. And I think that's what's really important is that I want people to be able to know our providers, our practice as somebody that's not just good at sports medicine, because yeah, that's important, but also to make sure that, that we are known as just good people. And I think that takes a little bit of that extra effort on there. But I think to me, that's really important that we get out of the office into the community and that we're known as good practitioners, but also just good people as well.
100%. And also, I think that by allowing yourself to do that, anytime you're exposing yourself to new people and new experiences, you're going to gain new opportunities and also keep your spark going and keep your inspiration
100%.
growing, so that you just keep rising up to that next level, right?
100%.
Contact info, all your social media links, because you do some really cool stuff for football
Yeah.
injuries. I won't go into that, but it's a really cool, fun little thing. And I don't really even like football, but I found them interesting. So I'll make sure to put all your contact info in the show notes. So thank you so much for taking your time to inspire and educate our listeners on all the awesome things that you do to help them stay healthy and mobile and on the go.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks so much for having me on, Abby. It was great.
So thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Your Fitness Chick podcast. As always, I'm here to inspire, uplift, educate, and motivate you to become your best self. I'll see you here next Tuesday for a fresh episode. Hey, it's Abby, your fitness chick. Thanks for checking out today's episode. With your continued support, I can keep creating inspiring episodes just like this one. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. To stay motivated all week long, be sure to follow me on all my social media platforms. The links for those can be found in the show notes. Check out my website by visiting www.yourfitnesschick.com. And I'd like to thank my production company, Coraggio Media, but most of all you, my listeners, for helping to inspire me each and every day. I'll see you on the next episode.